Hi everyone, my name is Aditya. Welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be a little different than from what I usually do. And today I'm going to be talking about the differences between the SAT and the ACT and which one you need to choose and how these tests differ. So the first thing that I want to get across is both these tests are known as standardized tests. These are tests that you need to write and are required in your application when you apply to a lot of colleges, especially in the United States. And a lot of colleges outside the US also accept these tests, so it's an added advantage if you do them. So it really depends. The first thing is it really depends on which college you're applying to and which test they accept. Most colleges accept both of them, and as a student, you have an option to choose either one of them. You don't have to write both of these tests in any case. So the second point I want to tell is you really need to know the nature of both the tests to make a decision, because even though both the tests are equally accepted everywhere and neither of them is considered inferior to the other, it's important to know how these tests differ from each other, because I feel there is really a big difference after I personally tried both these tests out. So the first thing is I want to clear up the misconception of one test being inferior to the other, and the reason I want to emphasize on this is because I have personally heard from other people, known people who have tried the SAT first, and after their scores were okay, not too great, they tried the ACT and they reportedly got much better scores. And when you do both the SAT and the ACT for every year, I don't think there's an official equivalence chart, but you should be able to search for these charts and find a chart where you have the equivalence. You can compare your scores on both the ACT and the SAT and see which comes out better. So if you think your ACT score is higher, then you can apply with that instead of the ACT score. So even though I have heard a lot of people trying the ACT and I've heard that they got better scores there, after personally trying it out, in my opinion, for my work, I feel that SAT is better suited for me. So it really depends on the student and how you have practiced, and I'll get to the exact reasons soon. So the first point is, let me start with the SAT. And the SAT, I feel it rather than testing the exact concept, it's a very logical test, and it focuses on how well you read the question and how well you interpret it. So both the SAT and the ACT, they have an English section and a math section. So the SAT, in the math section, they include these science questions, which are basically questions with graphs and experiments which are conducted, and you need to interpret these experiments. But the ACT has split it up and they have a separate science section. So that is one main difference. Now, apart from that, if you take the actual concepts that you learn in school, I feel that the SAT, for the math, they test lesser concepts. For the English, they test a little bit more. But overall, rather than testing the actual concept, they test how well you apply the concept in that situation and how well you read the question. Because often, if you see, it's not okay if you quickly skim through the question. There's very high possibility that there's one specific word in the question that would have made the answer completely different. Whereas in the ACT, if you take both the English and the math, the number of concepts that they test is much more. I have noticed, especially on the math. For the English, it's my opinion that it's much more easier. But due to the nature of the test, because of the time you have and the number of questions, you really can't spend a lot of time on all the questions. And because of that, it's not very tricky. It's relatively straightforward, and a quick skim through, you should be able to get the answer very quick. So overall, if you take the timing, the total time of the test, it's pretty much similar. It's 3 hours for both if you exclude the essay section. So both the tests have an optional essay, and if you exclude them, it's 3 hours each. Number of sections, number of questions will differ, but the total time is the same. But if you take the total number of questions, the ACT has much more questions, and that is completely related with the previous point I just told. So because you have more number of questions to solve, you really don't have much time to give to each individual question. So those are the main differences. And because of the nature of how I practiced, I started with the SAT, and I was getting okay scores, but when I wanted to increase the scores, I started to realize that the reading of the questions and the answering of those specific questions and understanding those nuances of the test were very important. And because I started paying a little bit more attention while focusing on the time, when I took my first ACT practice test just to try it out, I noticed that I wasn't able to keep up with the time, even though I knew all the questions and they felt very easy. So even though they felt very easy to understand, and I knew I was capable of solving them, I always felt that there was a possibility that I might make a mistake. It was just trying to trick me because of the way I was practicing for the SAT. So maybe a few more tests I would have got it, but because of this tendency that I had, I felt that it was better for me to stick with the SAT, because at the end of the day, I only need to choose one and apply with one of them. So you need to make that decision too. So these are the main differences. So you have the difference in the sections. It's going to be split out, the difference in the number of questions and the timing. So the SAT is going to be a little bit slower paced compared to the ACT. ACT, you're going to be working very fast, relatively straightforward questions. And the other major difference is, so as I said, reading, writing, not much difference other than the time. But for the math, I told you that the ACT tests a little bit more concepts. So I feel that for the SAT, if you have know relatively all of the most of the concepts, at least maybe 80%, 75% of the math concepts, I feel even if you're in the 8th grade or 9th grade studying in an Indian school, you should be fine, whether it's CBSE, IB, or IGCSE, whatever curriculum it is, the UK or the Indian curriculums that you have here, you should be okay, because on the SAT, the maximum that they test is quadratics, polynomials in general, the roots of the graph. They just the extremely basic concept of complex numbers, that is the square root of -1 is an imaginary number I, that's it. So it's very basic level math. It's extremely basic, and it's just your application, the concept, you applying it in that scenario. But in the ACT, again, there also it's very limited, but the number of concepts increase. For example, I saw a question on matrices in math, and they even give you the formula. So for example, if they test the concept of complex numbers or matrices, they will give you the question and they'll actually give you the formula that you need to use to solve it. So there's no need for you to memorize anything in any of these tests. But if you just want to have an idea of what you need to know before you write the test, this should give you a picture, because the ACT does require you to know a little bit more. And that's pretty much the gist of both of these tests, and it should give you an idea of how to solve it. And maybe in terms of the time you need to solve, I think what you will be able to find anywhere else on the internet should give you a good picture. People usually say around 4 to 8 weeks, and that really depends on the person, but that's pretty much I can say, because it's very dependent on the person, the student who is studying, and this is what has worked for me. So I've tried to give as much as information I can to help you decide which is important and decide the differences. Because even though I've, based on my experience and hearing from other people, I initially assumed that the ACT was easier. After actually trying it out, I can definitely tell you that there is no such thing, and they're equally valued, and really depends on what you're better at. So I suggest that you try both of the practice tests. It's hardly going to take any time, and depending on what you feel is easier, and checking out your scores with the equivalence charts you can find online, you should be able to make a decision. So that's all for this video. If you liked it, please share it with everyone. I hope it's very useful. And if you have any feedback or comments, please leave it in the comment section below. And if you have any questions also, I'll be happy to answer them. So that's it. I'm going to wrap up this video. Thank you for watching.